Well, this question comes from an unnamed individual. you know, in Birmingham, Alabama. It's funny. Kevin, our webmaster, decided to clean up the Gravity forums that we use to have people ask questions. And normally that runs you through a bit of a thing. You want to ask a question to ask Paul. You are asked to put in your first name, and then another field says, where are you located? And Kevin said, why have so many? That puts people through pain. So I'm just going to have name and location. And so far, most people are either not putting their name in and their location, or they're putting their name in and no location. But anyway, so whomever this is, I know you live in Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, question for you, Paul. Do high-end CD players or transports utilize DSP to color their outputs? Yesterday we were talking about EQ, whether digital EQ or analog EQ is better. So this is kind of a nice follow-up question to yesterday's one. Why do so many audiophiles say that a digital player outputting a digital signal can sound better than a cheap CD player with SPDIF out? It seems logical that these audio nerds, hey buddy, you're talking about me, could actually be hearing subtle DSP EQ curves happening to their music in these expensive players. Wow, that sounds almost like a conspiracy theory, that we as manufacturers subtly EQ the sound just so mine sounds better than yours. No, they don't do that. I will tell you a quick little story. One of the cheats that we used to do years ago, don't do it anymore, but I wouldn't hesitate if it made sense. When we built preamps and power amps, we would always make them just a little bit louder than the average that you could go out and buy. And we did that because people almost always consider something that's just a little bit louder to be just a little bit better. And it worked. I mean, we never did it a lot, but it was a couple of dB, and it worked. And they actually did sound better, but gave us a leg up and a quick A/B demo. All right, on to it. No, we manufacturers also publish specs, and our specs are flat as a board, and we try really hard to get all that flat. But especially when a digital CD player, there's really no sense in doing DSP. But it doesn't answer the basic question of why then does a high-end CD transport or player sound better? Well, we've been through that a lot in these series, and there's, oh gosh, reasons. For instance, less jitter, the changing of timing within a digital audio stream, which confuses DACs and makes them sound not as good. So if you recall in some of our earlier videos, the CD player or the CD transport is the controlling clock for the DAC. So remember, in anything in digital audio, you have to have a clock that's synchronizing everything to a very specific, very precision level. So if we're playing CDs, we're at 44.1 kilohertz. Well, that, when you multiply that out times 16, that frequency that it's running at has to be very exact. If it's changing and moving, you'll hear that in artifacts of the sound on a good system. And we don't want that. What we want is a pure precision frequency that is what we would use for our master clock. And in a cheap CD player, we might use cheaper parts that don't quite keep everything as precise as possible, but remembering that the master clock comes from the transport. So for instance, when we send data out of our transport, the very first thing we do is we build it up into a buffer, because the signal that we get off of the disk is varying up and down. And instead of using a phase lock loop, which is what a lot of ones do, and gosh, I'm getting I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit too technical here. A phase lock loop is basically a circuit that looks at phase differences, which happen when we have timing differences between a reference signal and what's coming in, and it varies the frequency of the clock to try and keep everything lined up. And if it does that quickly enough, if it's changing enough within the audio band, we'll get jitter. A better way to do that, if it's varying frequency here of pulling all the data off the disk, a better way to do that is just load it up into a buffer, let it hang out and be variable as it's filling this buffer up, and then we use a very precision fixed clock to then output that store of data to your to your DAC. And when we do that, it sounds a lot better. No DSP, but doing things that make it much more precise and accurate. And that's just one of many things. There's noise. There is, well, we talked about the accuracy of the clock. Oh gosh. Even the shape of the digital signal coming out can have an effect on some DACs. So there's tons of stuff. We spent years doing it, but that's in a nutshell why some higher end CD transports and players sound better. And that doesn't address anything in the DAC, which ultimately is what you're hearing, but we can do that on another day. Okay. Thanks out there in Birmingham, Alabama, and I will talk to you later. Thanks.